So greetings, hello. This is Dr. Thomas Stafford again, broadcasting this weekly talk that I do on Sundays when I'm fasting. And it's my contribution to public debate around the future of the UK and whether we should do Bremain, which is what I think is the intelligent choice, or Brexit, which I think is an absolute nightmare. Not least for all the probably about 1 million people living in Europe who are of British origin, and then hundreds of thousands, no more, million plus, European Union nationals who are living in the UK. The disruption it'll cause is horrendous. It's already causing disruption. I read this week that a Portuguese nurse who's been living in Britain for years and years and years and won the Nurse of the Year award, is married to an English woman, they have 3 kids, settled family. He won the Nurse of the Year award in the UK. The uncertainty of Brexit has caused him to have a mental breakdown. You know, it's like people like me, we wake up every day literally not knowing if we're going to be able to stay in Europe. And the pressure is unbelievable on people both sides of the channel. I think it's horrendous. I think it's like the worst policy decision. You see, it wasn't the fact of having the referendum that annoys me. That was fine, have a referendum. But be honest about it. It was an advisory referendum. It was only like an opinion poll. It had no legal force status. And yet, what's happened is the media and the Tory party have twisted it so that it became like statutory. And the hard left, for reasons of their own, also decided to twist it and make it like compulsory. I think Corbyn was utterly misadvised and ill-thought it out. So anyway, enough moderate voices now. I see Rory Stewart, a moderate Conservative, has also joined the enlightened camp of people that are leaving the Conservative Party this last week. So where are we at? Well, today and in the next couple of weeks till the end of October, we're on a knife edge waiting to see if Boris Johnson will have actually followed the law. He's been told by Parliament that if he hasn't got his deal through Parliament by a certain date, that he has to write a letter requesting an extension to our leaving process, during which time we could either have either or both a general election and a second referendum. I think both those things should happen during this 3-month referendum extension period. Boris Johnson should be required, as he is by law, to write that letter. And he has actually released in documents to the Scottish courts, thanks to Joanna Cherry, that yes, he will be writing that letter. He doesn't intend to break the law. But the thing is, he says that on the one hand, he says that to the court in Scotland through his lawyers. On the other hand, he's saying still every day, broadcasting, that we are leaving on October the 31st. So he's saying totally diametrically opposed things. In one of them, he's lying. And literally with Boris Johnson, you never know if he's lying or telling the truth. The chances are he's lying normally. I think it's a default position. He's been miseducated at Eton and elsewhere into thinking that to succeed in politics you have to lie. Well, that's the school of darkness, my friends. I don't agree with that at all. I'm with the Gandhian tradition that in the school of real politics, you tell the truth and you work with dharmic forces. And he represents the complete antithesis to that you should lie, and if you get away with it, it doesn't matter. It seems his colleague Trump is in the same school. Trump is now facing impeachment in America. He's also in the school of lying, and thinks that that's fine, that's the game of politics, because that's what he's used to in the business world, which is cutthroat and vicious. Well, no, politics shouldn't be about that. Politics is building the city of the kingdom of God on earth, according to our highest, best aspirations, building a city of peace and a countryside of peace, living in harmony with God's will and purposes. That's why we're here on this plane of being. And all the greatest statesmen and women of history have said that, including the founders of the European Union. That is why it was brought into being. Including also the founders of the United Kingdom. King James VI of Scotland, who was the first king of the United Scottish and British Crown, was a great visionary of peace. He saw Europe at peace. He wanted to reconcile Protestants and Catholics into one great family of authentic Christians, and was a highly educated man. I've been to Stirling Castle, where he was partly raised, and where he himself then had his son Prince Henry, who was destined to become his successor, but who tragically died in a poisoning, Prince Henry, and so didn't succeed. Roy Strong calls that England's lost renaissance. Had Henry succeeded, the Civil War would never have happened. So anyway, we are where we are, and what I'm trying to do is be faithful to the vision of the United Kingdom as an island of saints. Scotland, England, Wales, Northern Ireland. We're a people of saints of many diverse origins and many religions and many cultures, Christian and Druid, ancient and modern, and we should stay together in peace. But there needs to be a devolved settlement. There needs to be probably a new form of written constitution for the UK, so the Scots no longer feel aggrieved, as they rightly do, and want to leave and become totally independent. Otherwise, they will, and there will be total breakup of the UK. We have only literally probably a few days or weeks or months to save the UK from that, and it can only be done by pursuing the path of moral righteousness. Boris Johnson should, in my opinion, he's been exposed as a liar, he's lied to the Queen, he should resign. There should be, I always thought there was an unwritten law that if you were caught lying in high office, you resigned. There's a new law coming, which is like, if you can get away with it, you carry on lying. That's the law of totalitarian dictators, and I don't subscribe to that school. And I think Boris Johnson should be forced from office by parliamentary votes. And so this coming week, what is said to be happening is that he is supposed to, either in person or sending his agents, be asking the Queen for a further prorogation of Parliament as we speak. They're supposed to be in Balmoral this afternoon asking for this. Their intention is to shut Parliament down, then have the whole rigmarole of a Queen's speech, which will be basically a Conservative Party political broadcast, and then debates. And they're trying to fill up parliamentary time till October the 31st, keeping everyone on a knife edge. Will we be in the European Union after that or not? Personally, I think this is disgraceful. I don't think the Queen should agree to this, and she should tell Mr. Johnson to, focus on the matter in hand. I don't think a Queen's speech would be appropriate, because I think there should be A, the letter of extension for 3 months, B, a second referendum, and that would come following a general election. So I think, the order here is all wrong. And what the Tories are trying to do is, of course, confuse everyone, keep everyone guessing. They're the masters of the dark arts, trying to worry people. I was appalled to read that Dominic Cummings thinks this is like a good game. He said he thinks it's great that Parliament is being, messed about. The reason he wants Parliament to be shut down and prorogued is because then he can no longer go to court and prison for his refusal to give evidence to a committee. Dominic Cummings is in contempt of Parliament. And I wrote to the Speaker and to other colleagues, I think he should be penalised for this. They're just trying to take away his Westminster pass. My friends, that isn't enough. The man is a crook, and he should be actually in prison. And Parliament has that power. Instead of just mildly and meekly allowing to be shut down, Parliament should be arresting Dominic Cummings. Drag him out of number 10 Downing Street, where he is masterminding Brexit as a kind of evil genius, a totally arrogant person. He's not just in contempt of Parliament, he's in contempt of the British people and in contempt of all moral laws. Now, the media in their campaign have said, no, this is the will of the people. Of course it's not. The majority of the people of Britain did not vote for actually any kind of Brexit. Certainly not for a hard, diabolic, self-harming Brexit. And if Dominic Cummings actually thinks that, then he is a psychopath. And the chances are, I think the evidence is he probably is, a socio-psychopath. Certainly very arrogant. And the fundamental cause of Brexit is this immense hubris or arrogance in a certain ruling elite class of conservative elites. Now, I happen to know that type because I've taught them. I was educated among them. I went to Brighton College. I've taught at very good schools in Britain. So if you want, I'm also part of the same class. I can recognise where they're coming from. And in my meetings in Parliament, I've met people. I've even met the Duke of Edinburgh and been at meetings with Prince Charles and the Queen and so on. I know these people, but there are two types. There's the good ones who are genuine, who speak the truth, who realise the responsibility of what it is to be from a British, let's say, ruling class society. And then there's the really diabolical, negative, evil ones who just see it as a personal aggrandizement journey, and that if you can lie and get away with it, that's what you should do. Well, I'm obviously, utterly opposed to that. And this is a moral struggle going on inside the conscience of every person in Britain and the UK and every person ultimately in Europe and the world. We need your help to stop Brexit. We need all good Americans, all good Commonwealth citizens, Canadians, Indians, to rally round and support the Bremain campaign. We need all the people in India and other Commonwealth countries to support us. I run the Commonwealth Interfaith Network because I believe that all spiritual masters of the planet, of which there are many in India and Commonwealth countries, are trying to keep unity, trying to keep the United Kingdom together, trying to keep us in a united Europe, and indeed a united Commonwealth. So that's what's at stake here on this Sunday, and it's important. It's the 6th of October. It's a historic day. Now I want to say a little bit. This is on a slightly more personal note. It's still on Brexit, but I have some important news to share, and I've decided to go public with this. I believe that truth, works best with the oxygen of information, and it's like we can all breathe and circulate truth amongst each other. If we're going to bring an age of Satyuga, the golden age of truth, back, which is what all the spiritual masters of the planet have always been working for, and what my project Womask is about, then we need to circulate the truth. Now, many of my close friends and colleagues connected with my Peace Institute know that 2 years ago I had a very close friend who'd become a friend. He was a man called Mark Williams. He was Cornish and a lawyer. He was trained as a lawyer. He really appreciated the work I was doing against Brexit and had decided to come and live out here in France. He went so far as to buy a house 10 kilometres from here, and he was really looking forward to moving out of London and coming here. And I was looking forward to having a colleague who was a trained lawyer who was going to support the campaigning. Before that, he'd been campaigning out Downing Street. He was part of a group that was protesting and waving placards outside Downing Street every week. And he was extremely active on social media as an anti-Brexit campaigner like me. Anyway, it was amazing. He was coming and I was looking forward to it. And then the last time I saw him, he said to me with a sort of strange glazed look in his eye that, Thomas, I'm going back to sell up or rent my house in London and come out and join you and get on with this work. But he said there may be some forces trying to stop me. He looked at me with that quizzical look, and I still to this day kick myself that I didn't make him sit down again and tell me what he meant and go into detail. And I wish I'd gone to London and helped him pack up his house. But instead, what happened on October the 4th, 2 years ago, he was found dead in his house. And I had an immediate reaction. I knew instinctively, and I'm quite, intuitive kind of person. I knew he'd been murdered by forces that were trying to prevent our successful campaigning against Brexit. And he was such a powerful, dynamic force for good that was joining with my energy that we would have been a pretty powerful team, I think. No, he's found dead. And I knew, I have to say that immediately, that it was murder. And I also had an intuition. I knew he'd been murdered because of his fierce stand against Brexit. Now, lots of our mutual friends in campaigning on social media were shocked when I told them. And there was a certain ripple of fear went through that whole community. Like, if they would go to this extent to kill off one of our key campaigners, what would they not do? So I then immediately contacted the police in Surrey, where this incident happened. He was found dead. And I told them, and the coroner's office, who were investigating, that it could not be suicide. And I gave them 40 reasons, which I think still stand in any rational common sense analysis, to prove that this guy would not have committed suicide. Now, the only implication after that, then, if you rule suicide out, is he was murdered. I mean, he was found hanging, so this couldn't have been accidental. He wasn't the kind of guy to play noose games, right? He was found hanging, so it had to be murder or suicide. And if I'm pretty sure I can rule out 99.9% certain it wasn't suicide, then it logically follows it was murder. Now, I thought the police were paid to investigate potential murder cases. I sent them the evidence, I rang them 20 times, I wrote to them, I contacted the head of Surrey Police, and I said, look, this is a major crime that's been committed. And I said, I think the evidence shows this was probably to silence his Brexit campaigning. I said it was either done by a very professional hit squad, either paid for or on contract to either an intelligence agency or a foreign intelligence agency that wants Brexit to continue, or it was done by some rogue right-wing fanatical nutter like the person that killed Joe Cox, who was also an anti-Brexit campaigner, who was killed by one of her fanatical right-wing stalkers. And so someone like that, you know, the fascist types that troll you, could have just done it. And I said, look, it's up to you guys, the police, to search it and find out who did it. I got completely and utterly stonewalled, right? So for months and months, I kept pursuing them, kept writing them, and was completely ignored. Never once did they write to me, ring me, or visit. If I was the head of Surrey Police, I would have immediately sent an inspector out to investigate. This man was, at the time, my best, closest friend. He gave me his files for safekeeping, showing his life story. And he was coming out as head of legal department for my Peace Institute. So all the evidence is that he was not suicide, it was murder. Anyway, I want to give an update because I've been in limbo for the last 2 years on this matter. And I tried with friends to kind of contact the spirit of this dead person. And only yesterday I had a very gifted psychic come visiting here who was able, through her own psychic powers, I don't really know how it's done, to contact his departed spirit. And it was a very interesting conversation that I had with Mark through her mediumship skills. And basically what I want to share now publicly is that it was revealed that yes, indeed, he was murdered, which is confirming everything that I've always suspected, right? And that he was murdered, what it transpired was, and, you know, wait for this is a bit of a shock, okay? But he was murdered at the behest of the CIA by a special hit squad contract person of Turkish origin who was given the job. But it was the CIA pulling the strings. Well, you know, that's been one of my suspects all along. And I'll explain why in a minute. Why would the CIA want to kill a British democratic activist? I mean, the guy was a liberal democrat, right? He wasn't exactly a revolutionary. Because he was campaigning so hard for stopping Brexit, like me. I think a decision was taken at the very highest level in the USA by certain rogue elements within it that Brexit was going to be seen as advancing American foreign policy interests. I think the people that run the American military-industrial complex, who make nuclear weapons and who manufacture this vast arsenal they have from the Pentagon, they're like in Murder, Inc. It's a business for them. And the CIA is part of their intelligence arm. The NSA that listens to all the conversations that we all do and the emails and so on. It's industrial scale Murder, Inc. that's going on. Why would they want the UK to leave the European Union? It's because the European Union is fundamentally a peace project. If you remain in the club, you have to kind of sign up to peace policy and peace thinking. Yes, the European Union is defended, and we would defend ourselves if attacked. But our primary goal is to bring peace among the European nations and with our neighbours. The European Union was created at the end of World War II after the chaos and horrors of World War II. And the French and the Germans said, never again will we ever go to war. We would rather be in sort of an interlocking interdependence, a set of federal relationships. And based on the ideas of David Matrani, the great political scientist at Princeton, where Einstein was working, they came up with this idea of associating and interlocking the economies of the different European nations so they would have a vested interest not to go to war. Now, however, the US, initially, under its Roosevelt leaders and under the moderate Democrat leaders like Kennedy and so on, they were 100% behind this European Union project. And Kennedy's personal friend, Roosevelt's personal friend, Jean Monnet, was the leading architect of this. He had worked with Roosevelt. He was from that left-centrist democratic political base that Eleanor Roosevelt represented, the great First Lady of Franklin. And the European Union was an attempt to bring about the peace realisation of the ideals of Europe at the end of the war. Now, why would the modern USA have gone against that? Well, the modern USA, in my opinion, has been hijacked by extreme right-wing forces who are very sinister, who promote and push their military solutions to conflicts. WikiLeaks have exposed that Hillary Clinton had engineered the downfall of Syrian Assad president as a matter of policy and helped unleash all the destabilisation of the extreme Wahhabi and ISIL types to bring down this moderate Muslim ruler. The Assad dynasty was moderate compared to the ISIL types. And yet America ends up backing these extremists, the ISIL types, which I think is an utterly ludicrous and wrong policy. I'm pleased now that there are forces that are speaking out for common sense in American policy, like Marianne Williamson in America. Bernie Sanders, he's too old, he will never become president, but someone young and enthusiastic like Marianne Williamson could be. I sincerely hope for my American friends. So I think America fell into the wrong hands, and what we learned from our interview last night with the spirit of Mark Williams is that there's a faction within the CIA that wanted this killing because, they want Brexit to succeed. They represent the interests of the military-industrial complex. They represent the interests of the arms sellers that are selling weapons to Saudi Arabia and have sold billions over the years to promote American arms sales and revenues, irrespective of human rights abuse going on by the Saudis in their own country, and the killing of journalists like Khashoggi, an intellectual who was, I hoped, to become part of my World Intellectual Forum group, which I'm on the board for globally, and also in the mass bombing campaign of Yemen. So it's a frightening and scary thought that there would be factors and forces in the CIA that would actually engineer the killing of my best friend. But that's what we learned yesterday. And I just have to assume that, it's not legal evidence. You can't put this in court, obviously. It's further evidence of what I was believing to be the case. And what we were told is that, yes, there are people in the CIA that knew this, planned it, organised it. But it's worse than that, because what we were told is that the UK government also knew it was happening and turned a blind eye. And at the time, Boris Johnson was the foreign minister, which means he was in charge of UK intelligence. And when I asked point blank, did Boris Johnson know about this murder, the answer was yes. Right, this is the guy that right now is supposed to be talking to the Queen and asking for yet another lie. And this man was responsible for the murder, ultimately, I would say, by not doing anything, of my best friend Mark Williams, who was my legal advisor. Now this is now personal, Mr. Boris Johnson. I want to see you in prison over this, right? Not only Brexit stopped, but you in jail, because I believe that if you colluded, as my friend alleges from the spirit world, in his murder, then you are a criminal of the worst mendacity that I've ever known to get near power in the UK. I've known former prime ministers. I've met them. As I say, I've met members of the royal family. These are decent people. You don't belong in their company. You belong in jail. And I want to see the evidence from British Secret Service files of this incident. We must have known it was happening. That's what we were told. And yet gave the nod. Fine. Hit squad, go ahead. Kill this guy. We want Brexit. Well, I'm utterly shocked and appalled that I live in a country where this man, Boris Johnson, can get away with this. And what I'm saying as a peace steward is, no, you can't get away with this. This is something that justice will find out. Justice either works through, courts, and you are being prosecuted in various courts. Dear Joanna Cherry is trying to get the Scottish court to insist you write this letter of extension. But I think this stuff is much more serious and needs to be persecuted at the highest possible level, prosecuted. The Queen's role in all this is important. I've been in touch with the Queen. She's a stability in the midst of all this chaos, and I hope she stands up to this evil force that Brexit and Boris Johnson and the Conservative Party are representing. They're not true Conservatives. The true Conservatives, John Major, the proper, decent Conservatives, Amber Rudd, they're all leaving the Conservative Party. It's a fake. You see, how the dark forces operate is they take over something and turn it into its opposite. The forces of light, are constantly under a threat by the forces of the lie. In the Zoroastrian tradition, and Zoroaster was a very great prophet, he pointed out that all evil, the only force the devil has, Ahriman, is the lie, which is druj in Persian. And the only force that goodness and truth and light have is truth, Asha, truth and righteousness. This is why I've founded this WMAS project, the World Messiahship, Avatar and Seishant Council. The Seishant is the Zoroastrian Messiah they're expecting, and the only force he will have is truth, righteousness. And that's what the Hindu sages, who comprise the avatars currently in incarnation on this planet, have. That's the force of truth, Sat. And we have to gather these people, the scattered forces of light, from around the planet. In Israel, again, there's a tension between, the right, who believe in violence and force and misusing intelligence for political ends, the Netanyahu team, and then there's the moderates, the left, the decent democratic human beings that want Israel to get on with their neighbours, sign a peace treaty, and let a Palestinian equal state come into being. A two-state solution where everybody wins, win-win. We could have a train service running from Gaza up to the West Bank, Bethlehem. I know and love many Palestinians and Israelis, and as chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for the Middle East, I've been working tirelessly for peace there. And then what I'm proposing in WMASC is it's a collective messiahship project. It's not any one person anymore. The world is too complex for that. So, yes, that's what's important. And yet the forces of Brexit, who are, if it's true they went to the extent of killing my friend Mark Williams, which it's now been revealed to me is true, they will stop at nothing. And we have to be very vigilant in the next few weeks until October 31st, which is the eve of Samhain, the Druid New Year. I want to look forward to celebrating that with you in peace. We've got an extension of 3 months at least. I would say go for a year, actually, during which time we can have, I think, a general election first, probably, and then a referendum. But it could be the other way round. I'm not, I don't care about that. Whereas the other lot, the Brexit lot, they want just chaos, fear. They want to drive the nurses of Britain literally into nervous breakdowns, and all the people of British origin living in Europe. Those are dark forces, and what they thrive on is chaos and disorder. Now, there's a whole tradition called chaos magic. These people like chaos. They like to unleash demonic forces because it gives them a sense of power. What I stand for and represent is what I can only call white magic. It's the complete opposite. It's order magic. And I love John Bercow, the parliamentary speaker, because he's always shouting, order, order. What he's saying there is, as an order magician, he's saying, let's have order in our society. Let's have truth. Let's have fairness and righteousness. I listened to a talk by him at Harvard University the other day, which he gave live. Brilliant speaker, and I hope that we get a new speaker elected, Harriet Harm, or someone who will have as much integrity as him, and stand up for Parliament's rights against these dark forces of ignorance. So, what is order magic? I want to go a bit more metaphysical here. Order magic is bringing together things that have been scattered and disparate. So if you think about what Isis did to the body of Osiris, Osiris is scattered into pieces, killed by Set, who's the force of darkness and evil. Literally cut up, like Khashoggi, our poor Saudi dissident friend, whose body has still not been found, And so what Isis does is she goes around Egypt and finds all the pieces, brings them together and resurrects him. Now that's order magic. And in fact, Isis, the Queen of Heaven, is the goddess of magic in Egyptian high magic circles, which is the origin of a lot of the esoteric traditions of Europe, including Christianity and Islam and Judaism, because all three were partly an offshoot of the highest forms of Egyptian mystery schools. And that's what Moses was doing, that's what Jesus was doing. And if you think about in the Mass, the Christian Mass, out of the chaos of Jesus' dismembered body, the Mass represents the coming together of the invisible church. It's Isis giving you the chance, Isis being incarnate in Mary, as the rebirth of Osiris, who then Jesus becomes. He is in Osiris's position as the Lord of the dead. That's where Osiris went. So really, Christianity is the continuation of the Egyptian mysteries with a different twist, and come down into incarnation. Now that's order magic, which ultimately is about love. How do you bring things together that have been scattered? Well, there's only one force in the universe I know that can do that, and that's what we humans call love. That's the magnetic attraction you feel when you fall in love. It's the loyalty and friendship you feel at a distance to your dear friends, family, scattered lovers, whatever. That's the power of love, and that's literally in every atom. That's the force that enables hydrogen and oxygen to create water. It's the bonding they do. It's the secret of gravity, it's the secret of electromagnetism. Our scientists are only just beginning to dabble on this. I launched the only journal in the world on love studies, and I would like for the next 1,000 years people to study and research these powers of love, both in the physical and the electrophysical sense. So, for instance, in spiritual healing, when a true spiritual healer works with somebody, they're bringing into form the power of love as a magnetic field that can heal the disturbed parts of the patient's body. How does that work? At what level is that possible? That's what our scientists 100, 200 years from now will be studying and understand. And the Oriental healing techniques and so on, they kind of are intuitively onto this. When they talk about the flow of chi or the flow of energy or prana, that's how love works and circulates through the body. Well, it does it globally as well. And that love is the opposite of entropy. Entropy is what breaks things apart. It's the Seth power, the Set power that breaks up Osiris. Love is the energy of Isis that brings the broken pieces of God back together again. And you can be on either team. I'm on the Isis team, and I'm on the love team and the synthesis team. The work of synthesis is bringing things together. That's why, as a scholar and a philosopher and academic, I've always worked with the higher energy of synthesis. What my field of transpersonal history has done is create a synthesis between transpersonal psychology, Ken Wilber, Jung, Saggioli, and all of them, and scientific historical studies. And like, instead of, say, Marxism, which sees eternal conflict between the classes and war and so on until the working classes win, this was an earlier form of an attempt at synthesis. Marx was a great genius, but he left out the spiritual word. And you can't get synthesis, you can't get peace without the Geist, the spirit. So love is the mystery of the sense of that Geist coming into form and reuniting souls that belong together, bodies that belong together, families, nations. The UK was born from that love, that synthesis. And so was the European Union. So was the United States of America. All these great countries came into being for a high destiny. It's an appointment with the divine. So every European member state, Sweden, Germany, France, they've all struggled through many, many struggles and fires to get where we are today. What we don't want to do is allow them to disintegrate. That's the set route. So love is the secret of political peace and stability in Europe and the UK. Metaphysically, it's I would say, if you've listened to my talk on Tantra, which about 50,000 people have listened to, you'll see there I talk about the metaphysics of Tantra as this tension between opposites, the dialectic, and the union between them, which creates a fusion of identities that are polarized. We have polarization going